So yes, I am so grateful to have the opportunity to convene this group of experts to speak about the circular economy. My name is Jocelyn Quarrell. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the owner and CEO of GoBox, a circular reuse system that eliminates single-use waste by providing reusable packaging as a safe and convenient service. Now, you may have already heard about the circular economy and its aim to eliminate waste. It's definitely become a buzzword over the past few years. But today we're going to do a deep dive into the topic in the hopes that you may become inspired to think about how you or your company may become more circular, particularly as so many of us are facing the task of rebuilding ourselves and our businesses in the face of the challenges that we are finding in this new world. So again, I am so thankful to be here today with you all, and I'm excited to introduce our panelists. We have Moji Ignun from Blue Daisy Consulting, Hawnuh Lee from Closed Loop Cooking, Nicole Bassett from the Renewal Workshop, and Kamal Patel from Circular Seattle. We're going to go around the group, and I've prepared a few questions to get the conversation started, but would invite our audience to please add your questions to the Q&A. Cassandra will be keeping an eye on that, and we'll allow some time toward the end of our session to get those addressed. So with that, let's jump right into the conversation, and we'll start with Kamal. I have kind of a big introductory question for you. And just first as a reminder, please give us a brief bio before you jump into your question or to your answer here. But Kamal, we would love to learn, if you could please introduce us to the language of the circular economy, and then explain what the social, economic, and environmental impacts may be, and how it can be part of a greater systems change.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Yeah, so I have been working on this specific area for the last 3 or 4 years now. And literally my main task has been to find shared language and to weave overlapping platforms. I work with we're not even a nonprofit, we're just a club called Circular Seattle Club. We took Circular Economy Club's tools from Europe and just applied it, did a few events, had lots of sold out events, and so we just kept going. And yeah, as my day job, I'm a designer. I work at the city, I work at the county, and I do digital design as well. So I was going to show what a circular economy was, because I think a lot of what we need to do is transition. We're literally talking about systems transition, and it's so big and complex that you need models and maps to find shared language. Otherwise, it's just words. And so I should share. Do you see a systems transition here? Great. So the circular economy is as simple as moving from a linear economy. It's just meant as a vision statement, but also a way to understand what it is. But a linear economy is basically about 90% of our economy. We throw away most of our materials. We mine them, we use them, and then we throw them away. And so what we're trying to do is transition to one that is circular and that designs out waste, waste from the design side. And then I'm going to be really quick about this, but it's basically uses this simple framework called very not simple framework called the butterfly diagram. And this is the basic concept across the world. Google uses this, the EU uses this, China uses this, we use it, but it's the basic idea of transitioning to renewables, circulating materials, and designing out waste. So it's basically 3 principles. A lot of what I'm doing with this is just introducing models and principles and values, I guess, so that way we can understand each other. This specific model has a biological side, so anything that biodegrades, and then a technical side, so anything like metals. And so you can see recycling, reuse, repair on there as well. And then they can also be used together. So clothes can be both biological and repaired. And the big other thing is the closest the loop is to the user, the less energy it takes, and the more value can be created out of that loop. So that's kind of the basic model that circular economy uses. And then you asked about the economic and well, the social and environmental. I tend to look at circular economy as a really good tool for material flows, but what it doesn't really do is talk about social dynamics or a lot of these other parts of the economy. So I also like to elevate Just Transition framework, which is a framework, I think out of Oakland. It's an older, all these frameworks are really old. Some of them are hard to pin down who designed them. But this one is a little more complex, but it's a more of a community-based platform or framework. And they call a linear economy extractive and a circular economy regenerative. And the main thing they do is they do talk about resources. They call it dig, burn, dump. And really, this is a circle. It should be a straight line in the garbage if you really wanted to, be real about it. And then the regenerative one is obviously circular. But what they do different is they connect consumerism into it, or enclosures of wealth, or militarism, which are all reasons why an extractive economy is actually kept in place. They also have a way for you to change the rules. The goal is to move from international rules to more local, but also have a global framework towards one that's more regenerative. So you still have resources, but it's based on cooperation or deep democracy. And then they have a values filter, which is, really helpful to kind of show where capital should move. And if we're talking about real economic change, you need to talk about capital. So they talk about shifting capital control of communities, democratizing wealth in the workplace, advancing ecological restoration, driving race and social justice, relocalizing most production and consumption, and retaining and restoring cultures and traditions. So I get that this is a specific framework. What's beautiful is that this is not the only framework. Some people might not, connect to this, which is fine. And so we have other frameworks we can use. And so the goal is to figure out how do we agree on frameworks. This is a model out of Europe called donut economics. And it basically, the basic idea, very similar to transition design, the transition idea, but they have this idea of a safe and just space for humanity, which is in this green space here. And if you fall short of that, you're basically, the inside of the donut is the social foundation, and the outside is the ecological ceiling. So if you go over, like in climate change, your data will help you see how far you are. Or if you go under, like in political voice, you can literally use data to show how you're missing the mark of a safe space for humanity. And I think I'll end there, but that's basically the models that are being used across the globe. This is a global language as well, which is another really important piece. It's really tied into the EU Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, thank you. I know there's so much that we could go into in each of these different models, but thank you for providing us with that language and some of those visual tools that we can use. I really like the just transition model. One of the things I think that brings in is not just talking about this concept of waste, but recognizing the sacred in everything, right? In materials, in people, and everything that we need to make an economic system work versus just eliminating waste. It's redetermining how we see value in all of these different aspects. So great. Well, my second question for you, Kamal, it would be, to tell us a little bit more about Circular Seattle and the work that you're doing kind of at the local or regional level to bring circularity to the Pacific Northwest.
Well, I do want to mention regional first because Portland is actually one of the first cities to actually be a pilot of the donut economics model. There's, I think, 3 pilots. One's in Amsterdam, where it was kind of being launched, Philadelphia, and Portland. And so I think I want to mention that because that's kind of an interest of mine. I'm looking to find who is doing this work in Portland, how do I connect to you? And what we're doing in Circular Seattle is we are also part of a sister org called Circular Pacific Northwest. So we want to connect our efforts with Portland's efforts and Bend and Vancouver. And so what we're doing a lot is doing events and mapping. We actually have a digital platform that allows people to map themselves, what they're doing in circular economy. And so you can go to circularcitiesseattle.com to find us right now. That will change. I think our future site's going to be circularpnw.com. But just sign up there and reach out, and you can see a little more of our work. But circularcitiesseattle.com shows a little bit more detail.
Great, yeah. And I love the mapping work that you've done on that page. It's so cool because when we talk about a circular economy, it's not just, I'm gonna do a circular economy and Nicole's gonna do a circular economy. It's the circularities overlap each other, right? And so we have to see where those overlaps are to be able to integrate and really create this local circular resilient system. So yeah, thank you so much for introducing us to that. And to your point, the donut economics model that you showcased, that is, you know, the model is was created by an economist named Kate Raworth, and economist, I should say, not economist, but please look up her book. It's called Donut Economics. And she also does a great TED talk on it if you're interested in learning more, but really interesting model to dig into. So with that, let's pass the mic to Nicole then, and would love it, Nicole, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the Renewal Workshop, your company, its history and vision for the future.
Hi, everyone. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you today. So the Renewal Workshop started about 5 years ago and came out of an evolution of work that I had been doing and my co-founder, Jeff Denby, had been doing in the apparel industry around sustainability, and kind of came to the realization that we weren't going to just sustainabilize our way out of a bad economy. We actually had to start doing different things around business model changes, and looked at the circular economy as sort of a place to go for inspiration and ideas of what that might look like. So the Renewal Workshop started to serve apparel brands in their product life extension or their post-consumer part of the journey around circular. So brands already get things back to them that are damaged or just like can't be sold again. Maybe a customer washes it, it's so no longer a brand can sell it as a new item. And what was happening is companies were either storing it or they were donating it overseas or they were landfilling it or destroying it. And that was making up between 1% and 5% of what they were getting back naturally. Now, that's not even talking about all the things that they make that are sitting in people's closets, and we don't have ways of disposing of them responsibly. So what we do, we have a factory outside of Portland in Cascade Locks, and we have partnerships with brands, and we take back that product. We sort it and determine the highest use of it. So following very much the visual that Kamal shared is like, we want to get it used first. We clean, we repair everything on site, and then we help the brands resell it. So we've built websites for brands like the North Face Renewed. We also have our own website as a marketplace, but more of our partners are starting to build out their own sales channels to sell their Renewed product. And so the apparel industry can be a little more like the car industry, where you have something new and you have something used, and customers can now start to buy the quality and the expectation and the trust of the brand, but they don't have to buy a new product. And what this does for brands is it identifies the opportunity to generate revenue without making more stuff. We also take responsibility of the stuff that can't get resold, and we do work on innovation around recycling. So we don't do the recycling, but we prepare it and get it out to recyclers. And our whole sort of vision is to be the operations enabler for apparel brands to get through those cascades in that loop, and say, how do we use it longer? And if we can't use it longer, maybe we make it into something else. And if we can't remake it into something else, how do we get it recycled into something? So that's a little bit about what we do.
Very cool, yeah, and wanted to also call attention to the excellent work that the Renewal Workshop has been doing in this pandemic to be able to address the need for PPE, and your team, stepped up and produce some gowns. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was right. It was a very interesting moment when I got a call from a colleague, or not, like just like a community member, who said, "Hey, do you guys have extra capacity? Could you sew gowns and masks?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess we could." Yeah, and that sort of started up over a weekend, and we were able to produce gowns and masks when Oregon was at a shortage at the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm.
Really fantastic. Well, last month, instead of an internally focused annual report, the Renewal Workshop published another report called Leading Circular, with a stated goal of serving the apparel and textile industry and providing pathways from linear models to circular business practices. And much of the insight on the circular pathways I felt feels really relevant to many industries, not just the apparel and textile. So I was wondering if you could share with us a few thoughts on how companies can begin thinking about integrating circular concepts into their own businesses.
Absolutely. Yeah, what was really exciting when we started to look at the impact that our brand partners have been making in transitioning themselves out of linear into circular is these pathways that you talked about. So one example, I'll share three, but one example to start with was around design. So one of our brand partners, the North Face, who'd been working with us for a while, we give them product data information that says this is how many of your items had broken zippers, or how many had we fixed buttons or had holes with information. And their design team got a hold of it and said, this is super interesting. How do we design so it doesn't end up being a problem later on? And what was very exciting about that is that question had never been asked before inside of this company. And so we took that on really earnestly and created a design residency for them. So they actually brought, we spent a day with about 12 of their designers and taught them about the circular economy. So much the same slides as Kamal pointed to, like what is circular and what does it mean and how do you design for that, and what does materials lives need to go into their, how does material go into next lives? And then they came out to the factory and spent a day with their product. And what was really exciting is the unlock for them when they looked at their product through a new lens. So they would say things like, "Oh, I put way too much stitching in this thing," or "I've overproduced this thing." And it allowed them to really start to say, okay, when I go to design circular product, I now have a sense of what the next steps are in the life cycle of this product. So that was one story. And I think anybody who has a business can start to like use those questions in the design process. Another one was around take back. So when we're in a circular economy, your stuff, and you make something, it goes out into the world. But now we have to start thinking about like, well, how do I get it back? And do I need it specifically back, or can it go into a system? So an aluminum can doesn't, Pepsi doesn't need their aluminum can back. They just want to make sure that aluminum cans are being collected. Our partner, Hilfiger and Calvin Klein, they said, okay, we want to start taking things back and we don't know how, but let's start with what we know, who we do know, and what we can control. And so they did it with all of their employees, and they had like 7 different company or like facilities around the US. And then they brought back like around 4,000 units of product in a take back program. And what that allowed them to do was learn from the experience in a place where they had control. And then one of the other pathways that I did want to highlight was with our partner Koyuchi, which is a home goods company. They're a very progressive company. They make all organic and fair trade, beautiful, beautiful clothes, home goods. And they said, we want to actually recycle our old product into new. Because they make everything out of 100% organic cotton, they actually have a really pure material type and could do that. So they did the research and found a recycler. We had the product. The 3 of us, the recycler, us, and Koichi, worked together at getting it to them. And this fall, they'll come out with a product that's actually going to be made out of their old product. And that was an opportunity because they had thought about and designed from the beginning and then thought through where it was going to go next. So again, if you look at not only the product, but the system that the product's in, you can start to identify ways to access those different pathways.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Nicole. And I think to the second example that you shared, experimenting with your team or folks that are really close in a more slightly controlled environment, I think that that's such a great opportunity to kind of try things out, experiment a little bit, and see what could work for you. And that's an excellent transition then to talk about, what are those small steps that we can kind of begin to work into our day-to-day to think and become more circular. So passing the mic next to Moji. Hi, Moji, thanks so much for being here today. Could you please share with us your journey to founding Blue Daisy Consulting, your company, and the services that you're providing companies?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Moji. I'm coming from Seattle today, so it's awesome that we kind of have a whole mixed mash of people here. But yeah, so I founded Blue Daisy Consulting in 2018, and that was after I had gone on my own personal sustainability journey, and I found the zero waste movement through, I think it was like a viral BuzzFeed video or something, while I was in the end of my end of college. And I started really getting into sustainability and being more active with it. So I was bringing my own cup to the coffee shop. I was taking my own grocery bags to the farmer's market. I was really getting into how can I be as sustainable as possible? I want to do all the things. And as I kind of got more into it, I realized that some of the stuff that I was doing was really going back to things that my parents had taught me. Just be resourceful with what you have, just be smart about the things that you buy, repair things before you buy a new thing. And so kind of I had these experiences where I realized that this zero waste sustainability movement was kind of getting this new energy, but I already inherently knew a lot of the stuff. So I wanted to bring that together. And so my background is in engineering and education, so I have this very problem solving and also curious mind. So I thought it made sense to take all of those experiences and create a company that would help specifically small businesses find solutions and opportunities to become more sustainable, reduce waste, and eventually work towards that circular economy. So I've realized through this work that there are a lot of different points of intervention. There are you can work with large corporations, you can work with government entities, you can work with nonprofits, but I noticed that small business is kind of one that's often overpassed or forgotten because it doesn't seem like it's always accessible to those kinds of audiences. So I do virtual workshops to help people just understand a lot of the vocabulary that Kamal shared with us, is what is a circular economy and how can I get involved? And also I do a lot of one-on-one consulting and just do an hour or two and just help them understand, you produce a lot of this kind of waste. Here's what we could do with that. Or here's some problem that you have. Here's how we can solve it, and get them some more customized solutions. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I love it. And getting a nasty reverb. I'm not sure if anyone.
Oh, lucky me. Sorry about that.
But Moji, you just recently announced as the Zero Waste Small Business Program, which is a great free program that you've started in partnership with Seattle Public Utilities. And then we would love to learn more about how this kind of public-private partnership is going to work, what the goals are, and maybe a bit about how, let's be realistic, COVID has made it all the much more difficult to try to eliminate waste, right? So how does that all play into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so you're right. It's a partnership with the city of Seattle. It was actually a grant that they set out. So Seattle has a nice budget for zero waste projects, and I was one of the grant recipients this year. And so there are several other things going on with that money, but my project specifically works with small businesses in the southeast part of Seattle, and that is a predominantly Black and Brown community. And I've noticed that a lot of these conversations tend to be specifically on the environmental aspects and specifically in wealthier businesses. And so I wanted to create a project that would bring it to people that might not necessarily get access to that kind of education. So the city of Seattle is funding some businesses to get to work with me and find ways to reduce waste.
And have you found that these conversations might be more tricky now in the day of COVID, or given everything that we're facing, or do you find that it's an opportunity to kind of, this is where we are today, but we have this chance to kind of change things up and make adjustments, and so there's a, how do we leverage this moment? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think there are pros and cons to what's going on right now. I mean, it's unavoidable. We're all stuck at home. So I do miss being able to just go to a business, and some people aren't really in business right now. They might have scaled back and gone fully remote, or they have changed their operations in some way. So I do miss just going into a coffee shop and being like, hey, like, have you thought about reusable mugs, and doing it that way? But it does open up the amount of access to people that are outside of the Seattle area. So I'm with you in Portland, but there's also people who have joined my workshops from all over the world. So it makes the boundaries a lot less limited, which is wonderful.
Yeah, most definitely. And certainly our awareness of waste as a problem has been elevated in this moment, given that things are coming into our home in a variety of ways, and often it's coming with access material that we didn't ask for, that we don't necessarily need, that we're not sure how to dispose of responsibly. Maybe there isn't a way to dispose of it. So do you have any advice on how either individuals or small businesses can take, the first small step in reducing waste, particularly in this challenging environment?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing I've noticed is that, so I focus on small businesses and reducing waste in workplaces in general, and your home is now your workplace. So we're combining those two things together, which is lifestyle changes. Depending on where you live, you might go to a farmer's market as opposed to a grocery store, or make some changes there. But there's also the printing and the things that you buy to do your actual job. So it's combining those things together, and now they're in your face. So my first step for anyone who wants to know how to reduce waste is always just gain awareness of the problem by doing a trash audit of some sort. So when I do it, it's very detailed. It's weighing things, sorting things, analyzing things. But with people, just on an individual level, it's just looking into your trash can and seeing, oh man, I had 10 takeout containers from the past week. That's maybe something I don't want to do anymore. How can I change? So it can be as formal or informal as you want, but just noticing what the issue is always the first step.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and something that I've been doing over the past few weeks, I kind of got inspired. I saw a post from Solve, which is an organization that does a lot of cleanup events. And they posted something about how, we're about to enter the rainy season, and all of the litter that's in our environment is going to be caught by the water, and it's going to enter into the drains, and it's going to find our way to our rivers, and it'll find our way to the ocean, and become a part of this plastification of our marine environments and all the damage that is causing. So I felt inspired to buy like one of those trash picker-upper things, and now when I'm on a dog walk, I take a trash bag with me and picking up waste. So kind of like, two birds sort of a thing. And it's remarkable to see the type of wastes that are in our community. And I think it's just been very eye-opening, no judgment. We're all sort of learning here. And I think that's the approach I'm taking, is just what sort of waste is our society creating, and then how can we, as a community, work to reduce it. So a big aspect of that is this education and this communication, and so to that end, would like to hand it over to Hawnuh and talk about a recent study that was completed by the New York City Circular Initiative. And it showed communication as being one of the 5, what they called enabling levers that can really drive real change. They noted how knowledge sharing and an engaging or a shared narrative that we can all kind of get behind, a vision, if you will, can really help to support mindset and behavior change. And this is the space that you're working in as the founder of Closed Loop Cooking. So would love to learn your perspective on how words and visual assets can be leveraged in a responsible and effective way to create positive change.
Thanks so much, Jocelyn. And hi, I'm Hawnuh. Pronouns are she, her. and I run an online food mag called Closed Loop Cooking, and it is a resource index for folks to reduce food waste and single-use items, and to encourage people to get their own trash sticks while they're walking. So I think we can all take a note from Jocelyn. My background is in design, specifically in illustration, digital product design. I've run the gambit, and I noticed that a lot of my personal experience with food and sustainability was not connected to my background as a storyteller. And growing up, similar to Moji, I was very aware of all of these sustainable efforts that my mom put forth, and I kept those with me all through school and through college. And I spent 10 years in the restaurant industry, and the entire time I'm cooking and I'm practicing all of these sustainable aspects and learning how to cook and how to tell stories through design. And it was when I was a designer at Nike and realizing that the disconnect between the work that I was doing there and my sustainability efforts just weren't coming together. It became very clear to me that creating a narrative for sustainability was one of the best ways to ensure that people had context for how to make change in their own lives. So what the article is saying is basically we need to help contextualize efforts around sustainability in a way that feels accessible and welcoming to people so that they can partake in the actions. And Closed Loop is this culmination of all of my skills in the restaurant industry and design. And it's created this really cohesive narrative for people to become informed about the plant-based low-waste movement and feel like they have ownership in it. So using language and tone that feels welcoming and inviting and not harsh or judgmental is a big part of this conversation. We want folks to feel like they can show up at any point in their low-waste journey and be a part of the movement. And the small steps that they're taking are just as important as someone who's living a completely zero waste life, because every moment matters. So for context, it might be helpful for me to show you a little bit what this site is about. So I'm just going to share my screen. All right, can we all see this web page? So Closed Loop itself has gone through many iterations. I've gotten a lot of feedback running this for the past 3 years. It started off as a blog, and then I slowly realized that I needed this to be more expansive. So I do all of the visuals on here, but I work with a wide range of super talented contributors to help create resources, not just around cooking, but around the intersections of environmentalism, social justice, and food, because they're all combined. But within the site itself, you get a good idea that what you're looking at, which is plant-based and low-waste resources, it feels like you can jump into any article, and it is welcoming and engaging and playful and fun. And a big part of what we're doing at Closed Loop is creating resources that you want to come back to and you want to share with friends because they feel friendly. And it doesn't matter if you live a completely zero waste lifestyle. If you just want to learn how to make bread, that's one step further in your own journey. So my background in product design and illustration and photography all comes together within this platform. And we create videos and illustrations. And for example, if you've never made apple cider vinegar, I highly recommend it as an intro fermentation project for everyone. But if you've never made it, it feels like a totally daunting task, especially when you're using old chunks of apples that you might be throwing away. But if we can contextualize this material in a video that feels lighthearted and playful and easy to approach, folks might feel less apprehension trying something that seems complex, but is actually quite simple. So making use of several different mediums like video or illustrations to contextualize our great conversations that we have with our contributors, or just the content itself, it all feels like you can jump into any of these elements. So the site itself is growing and continues to evolve, especially as I'm learning and I get the opportunity to work with more people. But we've got lots of wonderful recipes about using up things in your own kitchen that you wouldn't necessarily know how to use otherwise. We've got lots of wonderful interviews and pieces on living and culture, and Moji has some wonderful pieces on here, so just a shout out to Moji. And then we also have a weekly newsletter that goes straight out to your inbox every Friday, and that's been another medium that we found is a great way to connect with folks as opposed to just posting on Instagram. So we've got several different mediums, but when it comes down to it, it's all about figuring out the right tone and story to tell a narrative that feels engaging and personable, because everybody starts somewhere. It's just about starting where you're at.
Yeah, I love it. I know there's, as beautiful as those images are on Instagram of people's fridge that is like all beautifully organized and like no pieces of plastic, it's just in a real world scenario so challenging to get there, right? So, but you don't have to get there tomorrow. This is a journey, this is a process, and so I'm really grateful for Hawnuh's work being, providing that sort of welcoming space and runway for people to learn as they go. Hawnuh, one last question for you. Any advice on how companies can tell their own authentic sustainability stories through their own communication outlets?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. First, of course, is revisiting your mission and your ethos and making sure it's in line with what you actually want to be putting out into the world. But creating a narrative for any of your products or anything that's going out into the world, you want to be able to have a solid identity system. So making sure that you have a recognizable mark and making sure that your color palette is consistent is really important. And you can just stick to one medium to get started, whether it's illustration or photography, but make sure that you are capturing the tone that you want to get across in your visuals by creating a mood board for reference or pulling inspiration from other sites. But consistency is really important. So start small to begin with and work your way up from there, but making sure that you are getting the message across on a regular basis and that it is consistent throughout.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a few minutes left for some Q&A. I'm not sure, Cassandra, if we got any questions. If not, I have some seed questions, okay, that we can jump into. Also, just a quick word for timing. The next session here is a break, but if maybe you don't necessarily need a break and want to stick with us, if we go slightly over on our time, we're grateful for that. And of course, would encourage you to connect with all of our panelists, to everybody's point, this is work that we have to do as a community together. So please engage with everybody after this conversation as well. But let me throw this question out to the group, and whoever feels comfortable can speak up. Oftentimes when we hear, well, recently in particular, when we are hearing about the circular economy, it is often described as being resilient or building resiliency. And so would be interested to hear from our panelists what you think that means. What does that mean? How does the circular economy build resiliency? Any takers? Come on, Nicole, I know that.
I could say something, and then Nicole, you could add to it if you want. I think a really interesting piece of it is the hyper-locality of what we are able to accomplish. And so I think that's really been important, especially during COVID. I can give one example of my favorite ice cream shop here in Seattle, which is called Sweet Alchemy. They are really great about their waste. They have everything in little glass jars. And what they've been doing too is that you can return those jars. So we're not setting them off to get recycled, we're just returning it right back to the shop, and that's a little mini circle that you can create there. So it doesn't have to be as overwhelming as I think the circular economy with a capital circular economy needs to be. It can be really small loops that are made. So I think that adds to the resiliency.
Yeah, I think a lot of you are experienced this, and I think COVID accelerated something that we always were like, oh yeah, in the future, these things might happen to us, and then it happened to us. And I think we all got to feel dramatically the pain points in which our linear economy is failing us, and we are too reliant on things that we can't control. So the ability to take the moment and say, where are the places that if they fell out, that would cause my business to be in some kind of jeopardy, and then to start to say, okay, how do I fill those gaps in some way? For us, what I think was very interesting is for the brands who are our partners, their like inventory or their feedstock wasn't somewhere else in the world. It was here in America, and it was considered waste. And now we turn this waste into a new product that they were able to sell in an economy where it's lower, a lower price point. So the brands who were already working with us had some little bit of resiliency built into their business models, because now they weren't just relying on the linear system. They actually had got themselves ready for this. So yeah, I just like, you know, the pandemic is tragic in so many ways, and it helped accelerate the points of like where linear is going to fail us, and how do we then see the places to invest in circular.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to you both. We got a question from Karen. Thank you, Karen. What advice might you have for businesses or individuals that are discouraged by what COVID has done to their waste reduction and sustainability efforts? How do we balance safety, sanitation, sustainability, and specifically the public's perception of those things? That's a big question. It's, I think, a really, really important question. So thanks, Karen. Anyone have anything to say to that end?
I can. I think that is a really great question, and I know a lot of business owners right now asking themselves this question. But most importantly, it's about being kind to yourself and starting with what you are able to do in the moment. And speaking to what Moji had said about small circles, there is an opportunity with every business to evaluate your own circularity in the moment. And maybe you can't overhaul your entire system post-COVID at the moment, but there are small places that you might be able to have impact. So for example, you are a restaurant and you've been forced to do takeout only, so all of your dishware is disposable. Maybe the first place you start is finding cutlery that is compostable, or maybe you transition over to GoBox, bringing that into your business, but finding those small areas of opportunity that you can make a difference, those add up. So just starting with one thing at a time.
Yeah, and thanks for the plug there. I definitely think, you know, something that I'll add to this question is, you know, the perception of safety is a very real thing that we have to recognize and be just patient with. That, you know, in this moment we're facing a lot of challenges, and frankly, a lot of us have you know, looking at that Maslow sort of hierarchy of needs, and many of us are focused on primary needs right now, whether that's making sure our kids are getting an education or whatever it might be, that is more challenging today than it was 8 months ago. And so maybe it's not the right moment for trying to push change when people are so preoccupied with other very important stabilizing aspects of their lives. But we can still use this moment to start to educate and inspire and communicate. And specifically, something that you know, GoBox has been working on is calling out, you know, the big kind of extractors when we can, and not allowing them to negatively influence or control perception, you know, as much as we can at our scale. But, you know, early on in the pandemic, when big oil plastic manufacturers came out and said, hey, reuse has never been safe. Single use is the safest option, period. You know, that's the way that we are going to survive here, without any you know, recognition of the health and environmental impacts that plastic production has both up and downstream. So you know, it's going to be a challenge, I think, for all of us that are in the sustainability space to kind of navigate where people are in this moment. But I think that's the most important thing, is just being patient and recognizing where people are and meeting them where they are, whether that is, you know, okay, we're just going to have a conversation about what the circular economy is, so that, you know, in the future you're ready to approach it. Or maybe there's somebody else that's like, you know what, I'm fed up, it's time to make a change. Who are the small businesses right now that are enabling me to live my life more zero waste? There's another great local startup called Good Life Market that is enabling purchases of like bulk pantry goods in reusable containers. So look them up if that's something that you're challenged with. But really, I think just having kind of conversations in this moment is really, really helpful. So we're a few minutes over time, but I have another question I'm going to pitch out there, just because it's a really important one. And again, feel free to drop out, folks, as your situation kind of mandates. But environmental intersectionalism, how does social justice work tie into the zero waste movement? I kind of mentioned it in that response I was just saying, but would love to hear from our panelists how they see those topics overlapping.
Okay, I can jump in if nobody else is going to. I am such a proponent of incorporating social justice and environmental intersectionism into this work, because food, personally for me, has always been political. And when you empower folks who have traditionally been underserved in food equality, you are creating other opportunities to help improve environmental efforts. So social justice and environmentalism are one and the same, because when you empower all people, you create resources that promote circular economies and allow resiliency within those communities. So for example, food deserts are primarily in Black and brown neighborhoods, and these create more dependency on takeout containers and single-use items, and they don't create the same resiliency within these communities, and ultimately these folks don't have the same equality when it comes to food justice. So when you provide communities with access to food or access to tools to create resiliency, or gardens or areas for them to get bulk items, you are empowering those folks through food, but you're inevitably giving them equality in the larger sense of things. So I think they're one and the same. And if you're familiar with Project Drawdown, one of the top ways of combating climate change is empowering women, and especially women of color, because they are leaders in this intersection. And if you're not familiar with Project Drawdown, I highly recommend everybody go read every single article on that site. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for creating equality across the board, because when we all succeed, we can all take a look at our environmental impact.
Yeah, I would just add to that, that just like Jocelyn was just saying about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and eventually once COVID is over, I feel like most of us are going to go back to normal, or some form of normal, where we will be able to meet those needs again, and we can move back into pursuing other things. But there are huge populations of people who still don't have those basic needs met. So how can we expect as a society to all move forward if some of us are still left behind? So we want to make sure that we include those social pieces of sustainability and get everyone kind of on their basic level good, and then we can all move forward together.
Yeah, this is Kamal. I just want to add to that. I feel like the other piece that I think is important is a sense of, not a sense, but a real moving of capital to communities, you know, similar to what I said on just transition. So I think an important part of the circular economy is moving from like centralized, you know, hyper-owned, you know, like small amount of people owning something, to more distributed systems, similar to nature. You know, how nature works is more distributed, more interconnected. I think as we think about circular economy, it helps us break out of our old patterns into new patterns that are just, you know, in its design more just, because it has to move capital in different, more decentralized ways.
Yeah, I love all of that. Thank you very much for your impact. I think one other thing that I'll say as a small business owner that is, trying my best to address this as well and build equity into our expansion plans, both for the internal team, but also how we provide access to communities, is to not make any assumptions when it comes to how different groups of people might approach sustainability. We are really looking to undertake a research study to determine what, if any, barriers might exist to different communities accessing or utilizing more sustainable goods and services. So if you find yourself in a similar position, this is a great opportunity to reach out to other community organizations in your space, or maybe concurrent to your space, or maybe some of the panelists here, to talk about that and talk about not making assumptions, but how do we approach making sure that sustainable options are available to as many people as possible, and if a barrier comes up, how can we address that, and making sure that everybody is part of that conversation. So I'll stop talking for just a moment to see if any of our panelists have any final words. But if not, I am so grateful for your perspective and for the time and energy you brought to this conversation and preparing for this conversation. Thank you so much. To our audience, again, would encourage you to please reach out to connect with these awesome panelists. And let's keep talking about circular economy and how we can work to, again, build this local resiliency, reduce waste, and make the environment healthier for future generations, for ourselves and for future generations. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.